Hello, my name is James Featherly. I'm a member of the Salman Collective. I've been practicing yoga and meditation for nearly 20 years, starting when I lived in Tokyo, Japan, working for an American investment bank. After leaving finance, I traveled around Asia, attended numerous extended retreats and teachings in Nepal, Thailand, Burma, and India, and did a temporary ordination as a Buddhist monk in Burma. For the past 8 years, I've taught meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy practices to individuals and small groups. So for this Sound Mind Collective second Sunday theme of impermanence, I'll talk a few minutes about topics related to impermanence, followed by a guided meditation and concluding with a Q&A session. So I find the seasonal transition from summer into autumn as a time, prompting reflection on change and impermanence. In spaces in the U.S., particularly northern U.S., other countries that have seasonal transition, the movement from warmth and comfort of summer days into the brisk, cool air of autumn is this environmental prompting to be aware and reflect on the nature of impermanence. Now, one of the foundational perspectives I would like to share really comes from a variety of wisdom traditions is that impermanence is an inherent part of the nature of reality. Awareness of impermanence is aligning our perspective with reality. Phenomena in the world around us, physical environment, our own bodies, our own cells, contents of our consciousness, state of our own energy, all of these are in a constant state of change. And to take a quote from the Buddha Dharma, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. And perhaps that's really the most beneficial aspect of aligning ourselves with the reality of impermanence, is that aligns us with qualities leading to fulfillment and happiness, and away from suffering and disappointment. So we can accept the basis of impermanence and tap into the shifting energy and the flow of being aligned with reality. If we fail to accept this reality, we often live in a state of fear of the unknown, the inability to trust in the flow of life, trust in ourselves, trust other people. We could be driven by anxiety, by a sense of angst, lack of clarity, frustration, anger, any number of other afflictions. When we choose to accept the reality of impermanence, this acceptance brings an openness to the fluidity and the flow of energy in life. Acceptance also brings a sense of ease, of not being rigid in our thoughts, not being closed in our emotions, opening us up to trust in life, to trust each other, the ability to connect with each other. And in this time of COVID-19, awareness of and acceptance of impermanence can also bring a sense of hope, knowing that the challenges we face at this particular time are also impermanent. And I think it's particularly important to not remain stuck in conceptualizing impermanence, just engaging in it as a construct of our imagination or a theoretical concept. But the importance of aligning experientially and accepting the reality of impermanence. And to that point, we'll engage in a practice of meditation to help facilitate that. So I would ask that you find a comfortable seating position, either seated cross-legged on a meditation cushion, seated in a chair, whatever posture feels comfortable and stable for you. If you're seated in a chair, if possible, try to align your back so it's straight but not rigid, feet flat on the floor, or in a lotus position, hands on the thighs, palm down, or in the lap, and gently close the eyes. And allow yourself a quick body scan from the top of the head all the way to the tips of the toes. And just observe any points of discomfort, any points that you're holding stress or tension, and make any adjustments to your posture so you can be comfortable and stable for the meditation. Open your Tibetan sound bowl 3 times to start and finish the meditation. This meditation focuses on awareness of the impermanent nature of moment-to-moment experience. So please anchor in present moment in the body by connecting to the breath, observing the rising and the falling of the abdomen. Observe the whole sequence of a simple breath. Air coming in through the nostril, the chest gently expanding, stomach, abdominal area gently rising. That little pause at the end of the inhale, and then the exhale as the abdomen falls, the air goes out of the body. A cycle that continues. The breath completes. It's no longer there. And another breath arises, rising, manifesting, and then falling. And using the breath as an anchor, gently and with intention, cultivate a feeling tone of warmth and kindness. Allow the warmth to radiate throughout the body. And gently observe as thoughts arise spontaneously in consciousness. Observe and accept without judgment. Whatever arises, receive with gratitude. Allow the arising thought to simply be. Notice if there's any edginess or tension that accompanies an arising thought, and allow yourself to open to it, receive it, and simply be with it for a moment. And allow it to fade away. If you start going along with the narrative of a thought, just gently return to the breath as an anchor. Observe the arising and the falling of thoughts. If a feeling of control arises, you want to control the thoughts, or control your responses to the thoughts. Just gently allow yourself to receive without controlling your experience. Rest in the sense of openness, non-judgment, receptivity. As you rest with this sense of openness and receptivity, allow a deepening of your engagement in your present moment experience. In this practice, in this moment, there is nothing to fear, no need to control. If any tension arises, any angst arises, a feeling tone that arises with a thought that afflicts you in some way, gently receive it. Allow yourself to be with it and let it pass away. If a challenging emotion arises, gently meet it with courage and a sense of receptivity, and let it pass away. The receptivity allows us to be in a way that denial does not. If the mind starts to go along with the narrative, gently And with intention, bring awareness back to the breath. Continue with the openness, allowing thoughts to spontaneously arise. Observe and receive with gentle kindness. Notice, observe in a state of receptivity, a state of openness, the flow of energy, and the connection to positive qualities. Experience the freedom of surrendering to present moment experience without the need to control it. And as you observe the rising and the falling of the abdomen of the breath, the spontaneous flow of thoughts and feeling tone, observe in this moment there is nothing to worry about. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to be anxious about. Allow a sense of clarity to replace confusion. Allow a sense of courage to replace doubt. Allow compassion to replace fear. Allow loving kindness to replace loneliness. And in these last few minutes, allow yourself to rest in freedom. And slowly, gently, make a consciousness print of your current state and prepare yourself to open the eyes whenever ready. Gently wiggle the fingers and prepare your shift and stay. Allow yourself some moments to reacclimate, and we'll start the Q&A session in a few moments.
James, thank you so much for being with us on Sound Mind.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing
Thank you for having me.
meditative prowess. Thank you for helping to create some space in our minds and hearts, hopefully, to replace some of the harder, or as we've been speaking, frozen tones in our body for something a little bit more fluid or playful, creative. Where is it that you are noticing clarity in your own practice? Where is it that you're finding new spaces? Where is it that you're feeling creative after so many years of being devoted to these practices?
Excellent question. I think it changes over time, and one of the aspects of aligning oneself with the true nature of reality is that it gives a sense of trust. I think a trust in ourselves and our own intuition and our own nature, particularly when that trust is cultivated through certain practices, and those practices cultivate certain qualities. One way that I've evolved practices over time is to really look at what are the states of consciousness, what are the states of energy that these practices are trying to cultivate, and what are the qualities are they trying to cultivate. And really over time doing the check-ins to assess, if I'm trying to cultivate a particular quality, for example, a sense of openness, what are the markers? How am I assessing whether I'm actually making so-called progress in that particular space? Even though there's somewhat of a paradox that progress is not the goal. It's following the path and trusting that things are going to strengthen and certain things are going to open up. But I think that the sense of openness, when you can create a spaciousness in consciousness and energy, the spaciousness will slowly become filled with certain things. And if we attune ourselves to looking for the signaling of how they manifest, then we can become richer and fuller in that space.
Mm-hmm. In that richness and fullness, what is it that you understand is coming to life, is being born out of these qualities, out of these characteristics, perhaps, that is actually timeless, is beyond progress, let's say? What is it that you feel like you're coming home to in yourself?
My own true nature. And I think before I discovered some teachings and some practices that opened me up to this possibility, I didn't even know that this was possible. And again, if you don't have a method, and you don't even have the idea that freedom is possible, freedom from suffering. If you're stuck in certain types of afflictions, anxiety, stress, tension, distrust, that there's a possibility to go beyond these states and cultivate their opposites. And that's really what I participate. That's why I participate in these practices, and that's why I try to cultivate them effectively, is to find a state of freedom.
Mm-hmm. That state of freedom, can it be sustained, or is it something that actually feeds itself? I'm curious in terms of our discussion so far in this installment of Sound Mind about feedback loops. So I'm wondering when it is that we are tasting freedom, when it is we're tasting a kind of knot that is bending us back towards our habitual patterns, and in a way that maybe we're still blind to. Because there's structure in these practices. There's the ability to measure. And certainly there's no denial or negation or aspect of being ignorant of progress, right? Like you're saying, we can feel it. We can feel ourselves changing. But then within that, it seems that also we fold back into ourselves in the familiar ways at the same time. It's almost like in the changing of the seasons, as you were speaking to at the beginning, that we come around. the blossom. There's that saying. I think it's Young who says, "Life is the blossom which passeth," but the blossom also emerges again. Do you feel like that's happening in this life, or is it something again and again, or is it something that is compounding, is maybe something that won't happen until the next time we incarnate, perhaps?
That's also, a really good question. And part of me, when I started to learn these types of teachings and attend retreats in different parts of Asia, and go to lectures and receive teachings from different traditions, I had a sense of trying to concretize and organize this material in a way that I was accustomed to growing up in growing up in the United States. And with the U.S. educational system, where it's very progressive, you learn your basic arithmetic, and then you go on to learn algebra, and then geometry and calculus, and that was sort of the way that I approached some of these teachings, which of course is very logical. But the body often in consciousness doesn't always respond and it doesn't respond in a linear way. And so often, I would learn something and I would get confused and I would try to apply it to life. And, sometimes I felt I was taking 1 or 2 steps forward and 20 steps backwards, until I could, then create a bit of a distance, and a little bit of, how would I say, trying to let go of my sense of duality, and open up and give spaciousness so that I could regain a sense of clarity. So just because we can, find a sense of clarity at one point in time, it doesn't mean that we're always going to sustain that level of clarity. Things can happen in life, challenges can happen, death of loved ones, very challenging situations like we're living in right now with COVID-19, that can rock you in ways that you perhaps didn't anticipate. And, sometimes your confidence and your faith in what you've been practicing and what you believe in can be challenged. And it takes a process of sometimes reevaluation. How do I incorporate all these new and challenging things that are happening, and how does that affect my existential view?
Does sound have a role to play in your existential view?
Sound absolutely does have a role to play, and I think part of the a couple of aspects of sound I started to be. I was initiated when I was in Nepal. And then, continued learning and exploring with different members of the Sound Mind Collective, and leveraging the aspect of vibration. Often when we talk about sound, I kind of relate to that experientially as relating to vibration, different levels and cadence of vibration. And, there at different points of energy, sometimes I feel I need that aspect of sound to help ground me, to help sustain awareness over a sense of time. That's something that I'm struggling with at that point of time. And to leverage different vibrations to create a certain state of consciousness. So, for example, Joss Peck, and Eliza lead wonderful sound meditations, and over the last several years, there have been a number of times when I've attended their meditations for a very specific purpose. I might have felt a little bit jolted in something in life, a little bit anxious, and I needed that aspect of sound and vibration to help ground me and reacclimate, almost like my body needed this reacclimation into a sense of stillness and peace that their particular orchestration provided. And so that was a very specific reason for listening to sound, for that ability to help it soothe and to help it calm.
Mm-hmm. Within those experiences, how do you find that sound, the vibration, physically is feeling for you? Because maybe there are people watching or listening who haven't encountered that use of sound in that kind of setting. Mm-hmm. Maybe people haven't been to a sound bath before, for instance. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can talk about the physicality of sound in that context.
Sure. When I attend something like a sound meditation, a sound experience, so to speak, one part for me was learning how to listen with the entire body and being open and receptive with the entire body, as opposed to focusing on the reception, in the ears. So opening up the sense that I can feel it, from the tips of my toes and the soles of my feet, particularly in, my midsection, my solar plexus, and opening up the heart space to receive that vibration, in the heart center. And part of that was developing a skill and an aptitude for really listening with the entire body, and again, not just with my ears. And that would take me into a dimension where it's not just, I'm not intellectualizing the experience, and in some respects, I'm not even really thinking about the experience. I'm just trying to be with the experience and let the vibration work its magic on my human cells.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like the cells kind of reorganize themselves according to the encounter with the sound, the vibrations. I'm wondering too, certainly that skill that you've developed in terms of listening, it must play out in unexpected ways in your everyday listening environment, let's say. Are you finding that you're able to connect with sounds that you wouldn't have noticed before?
Certainly, it makes me more receptive, more attuned to the experience of listening, and also realizing the effect that a sound or vibration has on me. So for example, in the morning, when I wake up, sometimes I will either listen to a sequence of harmonic overtones in a recording, or sometimes I'll simply play my own Tibetan music bowls as a way of connecting to that vibration and helping leverage that, letting that vibration, so it has help me come alive in the morning, so to speak, and vitalize me. And then there are other times that I want to listen to a different vibration before I go to sleep as a way of calming me, relaxing the body, and helping me prepare for that transition into sleep state.
You bring up a fascinating question for me, which I don't know the answer to, but in terms of impermanence, when we're listening, we become part of what we're listening to. We become what we give our attention to. So what happens? Where do we go when we're speaking, when we're not listening?
I think that depends on the individual and their ability to, not hold on to, but retain a sense of awareness of what is actually coming out of themselves, not only from the consciousness thought perspective, but also from the vibrational perspective of their voice. And in addition to that, the awareness, what's happening in your own consciousness is holding some spaciousness between yourself and the other person or other people to have a receptivity to what effect is my voice and the content of my voice having on that person.
So in many aspects, then the listening continues.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Are there speakers that you've particularly encountered where you feel like they're just incredible listeners at the same time? That they're doing this?
That's probably the most prolific example I can think of is when I was on a retreat at a monastery in Burma, and I met this elderly monk. I believe he was in his mid-60s, and he ordained when he was a young teenager, I think 12 or 13 years old. And so from his own personal transition from adolescence into adulthood, young adult, midlife, um, his entire existence has been cultivating the qualities of wisdom and compassion to help all beings achieve enlightenment. And the first time I had a one-on-one interview with this monk, which had to be through a translator because I don't speak Burmese and his English was limited. But just sitting in this person's presence and the sense of balance between compassion and strength and courage. You just felt this. His whole existence was to sort of support you and to help you and to love you and to care for you. And at the same time, his level of receptivity, even though again we're communicating through a translator, I just felt this incredible sense of openness and receptivity and caring, and that balance of qualities. Again, having this balance between compassion and courage and strength, and just wanting to be of help, of service to you, to help you on your path.
It's so powerful. It's so mysterious too, because from my understanding of these practices, it's something that is cultivated. It's something that we go into ourselves and, like you're saying, cultivate these characteristics. We become acquainted with them, then we become more intimate with them, and then they become us in a way. They're flowing through. At the same time, it's like the rain or the wind in terms of where do they come from? How do they come through? There's a sense of receptivity, as you're saying. Then they take hold of us, and we're able to witness people like this elderly monk that you're speaking of in Burma, who are completely filled with generosity or loving kindness, or these aspects of equanimity, just being calm, being open, being grounded. So it's a strange window into effort versus effortlessness. Whereas, like Michael Pollock was saying, the sounds he's becoming the sounds as he reaches into the bowls. And I can picture you also with your meditation bowls, your singing bowls, that you're summoning something that is beyond the bowls, but it comes through, that the vibrations kind of fill you up as well as the space until it seems like they're everywhere, but they weren't. But then they are.
Yeah.
And then they're not.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting exercise of practicing non-duality. To let go of the sense of the subject and the object, the perceiver or the interpreter of the sound and the sound. There's just sound. And part of that is that cultivation of the receptivity and the sense of openness to one receive it, and to also let let the ego take a little break for a while, and just allow yourself to just be the sound.
What
So
is it
you
that's
let
keeping the ego from taking a break? One might think that the ego maybe wants to take a break, might revel in taking a break, but it seems like in our world today, there's this dominant representation of ego that just is always on the clock.
Mm.
Is there some way to pierce through that?
Sure, and I think a foundational aspect of that is realizing that you are not your ego, right? Ego is just an aspect or a dimension of you. It does not define you. That's not the totality of who Josh Adler is. Right? It's just one. It's one aspect of Josh. It's an important aspect, but it's only one aspect, and it's entirely malleable. Right? It's not in a fixed state. It's something that we can work with and we can cultivate and we can mold into the qualities and into the states that we find beneficial.
We are so fortunate that we live in a world that is adaptable, that is not fixed,
Mm.
that this
And
impermanence.
in this day and age, we're in many ways we are so incredibly fortunate because what used to be this limited knowledge, in a place like Burma or Tibet, or these indigenous practices in Peru and Colombia and in Mexico, or other practices that might have been adopted in different parts of Africa or the Middle East. We now have access to them. The amount of teachings, if you think in 2020, the amount of teachings that are available to us, it's really quite extraordinary. And really the toolkits out there are all available. It's I think a question of working through what resonates with you, what works for you, and what direction on the path do you want to take. But we have all the tools to eliminate human suffering. It's all there.
Yeah, it's unprecedented in terms of the exchange of wisdom, of potential to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
Are you venturing into any new teachings recently? Are you discovering new tools that perhaps you hadn't been interested in until recently?
Not particularly new tools. I think it's trying to delve perhaps a bit deeper into some of the teachings that I received when I was in Nepal, in particular through some Tibetan Buddhist practices, and trying to strengthen and to cultivate them as I go through different stages of life. It's very easy at one point. One could be, say, 24 years old at Cal Berkeley, and they receive a certain body of teachings, and they cultivate certain qualities. And then perhaps that person gets married, they have children, and now their life is complex in a positive way. They have a loving relationship, and now they've created new consciousnesses, in these little human beings, and they're at a different point in life. And I think there's always a process of what one has learned. How do we refresh it and make it lively and relevant to that different stage in life? And then as we grow older, do we keep ourselves, enriched and enlivened as we pass through different stages in life? I think it's so important that we don't allow ourselves to get bored, to get stale, to get stagnant, and in this particular time, to not become cynical from the challenges that we're facing, around the world from a variety of different sources, but to keep that freshness, inside, alive, and to know that we have the strength and we have the toolkit to rise and to face these challenges. And Robert Thurman, a wonderful book he wrote back in the 90s called Inner Revolution. That when every individual in a society, when they start to engage in that inner revolution, they start from cleaning the house, so to speak, inside. And then they share that with family, and then they share that with community, and then the entire society is transformed by the individual being transformed. And that potential is always available, and it's always there. And the question is, are we going to step up and and take that path to help cultivate that inner revolution, and then hence revolutionize society.
May it be so. Well, thank you so much, James, for sharing your practices, the many teachings that you carry seeds of and are spreading and sharing. Thank you for your wisdom today, James Featherly. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Josh.